today, and we will receive a briefing from the DTI EDD on its fourth quarter financial and non-financial performance, quarterly reports from part of the ongoing budgetary oversight of the committee. Committees are required to table quarterly reports of the departments, reporting to it for the House consideration. So I think those are the two reasons why we are here today. So I would definitely ask to greet the Secretariat and all the honorable members. I'm sure we'll try and just run a quick roll call. Secretariat, I'm sure there is actually also the members of the general public and media who actually is part of our engagement. Can I ask you just to put up the agenda, Secretariat?
We will do so, Chair.
Yes.
Chair, before we do the agenda, can we just do a roll call of members' presence, Chair?
Thank you very much. I think we can proceed.
I will call the name of the member. Mrs. Hermans.
Present.
Yes.
Ms. Mwapse.
Present.
Yes.
Mr. Sebukulu.
Sebekulu. Nkosi Sebekulu.
Present.
Mr.
Present.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Thring.
Honorable Thring.
Chair.
Mr.
you.
Mbuyani.
Mbuyane. Mbuyane. He is connected.
Yeah, he's connected.
Earlier.
Mr.
Okay.
Cuthbert. Mr. Cuthbert.
Honorable Cuthbert.
I think he sent an apology.
Oh,
he
no,
did.
he said that he was on the platform, so maybe I'll double check with him.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Mulder.
Yeah.
I am present, Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Yaku.
Yaku. Honorable Yaku.
We see a Chair.
Yeah,
Miss-
I thought I actually speaking earlier. Oh, thank you very much, Yaku. Welcome.
Mr.
Yes.
McPherson.
Honorable McPherson.
Present.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mr. McCubbert indicated on the chat that he's present, Chair.
Present.
Yeah.
Ms. Mantashe submitted an apology. Ms. Mantashe submitted an apology, Chair. She's not still not feeling well.
No, Daddy has just spoken, Cuthbert.
Okay.
Daddy has just spoken, yeah. Welcome, Daddy. Welcome.
Hey,
back,
thank
Daddy.
you very much. Hello, everybody.
So I think we do make a quorum.
Yeah.
And I think, thanks to all the members who are actually in attendance, can we then really set up our program in terms of our agenda so that we can adopt and proceed?
We'll share the agenda now, Chair.
Okay. There is an agenda, honorable members, in front of you. So I think we actually looking at the adoption, briefing by ITAC. There will be answering questions, clarities, and then we'll take the next presentation of the DTI EDD fourth quarter, questions and answer session as well. Can I present this to the members for adoption, honorable members?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Watson.
Morning, everyone. I move for adoption of the agenda, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Unmute, Andre, unmute.
Chair, Mr. Cuthbert's
Yeah.
hand is up, Chair.
Chairperson,
Honorable Cuthbert. Yes,
can I
Honorable
please,
Cuthbert.
may I please make a request, Chair? Chair, we were supposed to be sent a list of beneficiaries of the NLC's COVID-19 fund, and it seems as if the week deadline has expired. Can we please get feedback on the submission of that from the DG, who promised that in the last meeting I was in attendance, please?
Can we actually just follow through with the DG?
Adoption.
Can we note that? Yeah, can we note that, Honorable Cuthbert? Yes. Andre?
Chair, we need the seconder for the adoption of the Ms. Hermans.
Andre, I just want to check. You don't see if I electronically raise my hand. Are you not able to see it?
Not always. Some members do. I can see some members, but other members I can't see. So not everybody has the.
So I must rather type.
Yes. Okay. On the chat.
Because I've been raising my hand electronically.
No.
Okay. Now, Chair, let me take this opportunity to greet everybody, especially the new daddy in the house, and congratulate him. We wish him many blessings with his baby. And let me then second the adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, let's check with. Let's actually check with members if there's any objection. Andre?
Chair, with regard to Mr. Cuthbert's request, we did receive it. We haven't forwarded to members yet, Chair. We should have tabled it this morning in the committee meeting, but we will forward it to members, the information as requested by Mr. Cuthbert at the last meeting, Chair.
Oh, okay. No, thank you. I'm sure, Honorable Cuthbert, you hear the feedback. We will actually, at announcement, and if ever there are any issues, look at that, because we'll generally do that before we close the meeting. Can we then actually proceed, because there's no objection, and actually invite the presentation, which is the first one. It was circulated to members. Secretariat, I'm not sure who will be leading the presentation. The DG, I spoke to greeted the DG earlier on.
Chair, Mr. Munzimandi, the Chief Commissioner, will do the presentation on ITAC's behalf, Chair. He will be supported by Mr. Mambu and Ms. Kruger, Chair.
Babu Nzimande, you are welcome. Thank you very much. Can you then take the floor? Siyabonga kakhulu. Siyakwemukela.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity today to address you on the contribution by ITAC to the fight against the spread of COVID-19. I am going to start by loading my presentation so that everybody is able to follow. I would like to confirm whether the presentation is on.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. I'm sure the technical team will assist. I see you very clearly, and I hear you very well. So that part is covered, but your presentation is not up yet. I'm sure the technical guys will assist, but I'm sure you can be able to log because you did it before.
Yes, I have put it on now.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, so it's come up. Yeah, we've got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I am going to jump straight to slide number 5. And start by reminding honorable members about the role that ITAC was formed to discharge. The aim of ITAC is to foster economic growth and development in order to raise incomes and promote investment and employment in South Africa and within the Common Customs Area. The Common Customs Area refers to the areas of South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland. It does so by establishing an efficient, effective system for the administration of international trade, subject to the ITA Act and the SACU Agreement. The SACU Agreement is the agreement between members of the Southern African Customs Union, whom I've mentioned. And the key instruments that we use appear in the last row on that slide, which is basically the policy instruments in terms of which to achieve particular policy outcomes. trade defense instruments, which help us to combat unfair trade practices. We refer to them there as trade remedies, as well as import and export control. We do this for various reasons, including the control of environmentally damaging products or other products. For today's purposes, the unit that is whose work has been important in
Chief Commissioner, I don't know, it's a bit of a disturbance there. Okay.
Chair, our ICT guy, person Namshla can maybe assist us in this regard, Chair?
Yes, okay.
Yes, if Mr. Nzimande could please just switch off his video, it could improve the quality there.
Okay, okay. No, I agree with you fully. Chief Commissioner, I'm sure you'll hear us and then you can switch off your video so that we can actually get more of your voice. I'm sure it's the connectivity. We'll just wait until he connects and technician can actually just check. Can give him a call, the technician.
Yes, he just left. He's probably just dialing in again.
Okay, okay. No, I'm sure he'll connect back soon, and then he can proceed.
Andre,
is it back?
Andre,
Okay.
may you please share his contacts with me just on the side, so that I can contact him and see if he's struggling with anything.
No problem, I'll do so.
So I think trying to get a good connection is a bit of a challenge. I see most members of parliament are getting into their cars. They say it's actually easier outside the house than being in the house, but they are not driving, but they are sitting on their steering wheels and participating in the committee meeting. Very interesting.
Chair, it only points out that we need to work hard to improve network coverage, especially in our rural areas.
Definitely, but some of the connectivity is terrible, even on built-up areas. It's not actually working okay, and for some members who go into cars, they are in areas where you think connection is great, but they struggle as well. Hi, Andre.
My apologies to interrupt. May I suggest, in the meantime, if we can't deal with the fourth quarter report, Chair, so that we behind the scenes can assist Mr. Nzimande with reconnecting, so that we do not know exactly the time that we will will lose now in waiting. So may I propose that we proceed with the fourth quarter presentation, if the DG is available.
Okay. No, let's check the DG. If ever is actually available, then we can just quickly switch to the second presentation instead of the one, because of connectivity. DG.
Yes, yes, Chair. Are we available? Yes, I'm available. And then Cholo, I will.
Yeah, switch off your video, DG. We have seen you so that your voice can improve. Okay. We are told it works out easier that way. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Much better.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, no, much better if you don't see my face. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As you indicated, we're doing the fourth quarter report, and just to remind you, Chair, this will be the last occasion on which we present two separate reports, as the former DTI and the former EDD, because The fourth quarter covers January, February, and March. And as you know, from the 1st of April, we became the DTIC and so on. So I will do the DTI report, and then Dr. Pule will do the EDD part of the report.
Chair?
Andre?
Mr. Nzimande has joined us, but should we proceed with the DG's presentation as agreed to?
Well, just check, because one will just want to ask a question if technically there might be a hurdle, which is it's actually sorted by if technician says no, it's well and good, we can go ahead, because we should know what would have been a problem. Yeah. So let's actually check DG. I think let's actually check with the Chief Commissioner if he's properly connected back, because
Thanks,
you haven't
Chair.
started. Yeah, because you haven't started yet. Let's just hear Chief Commissioner Nzimande. Let's just hear the complication.
Chair, I'm back. I am actually quite shocked because I've been on since 11 and it decides to act up now when I've started speaking.
Yeah, well, I don't know who's actually operating at the back, but for now, maybe DG, let's really allow the Chief Commissioner to proceed, and let's see how, I think we should be able to actually proceed, Chief Commissioner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
DG, thanks for being combat ready. So let's actually proceed with Chief Commissioner.
I would like to just double check whether my presentation appears on the screen.
Yes, it does. Okay.
Honorable members, I'll take it from the legal framework slide, which I think is where I probably got lost.
Yes.
On the system. Apologies for that. Just to recap, ITAC is a PFMA Schedule 3 public entity, which is established in terms of Section 7 of the International Trade Administration Act. It reports to the Minister of Trade and Industry. As a public body, it is bound by the Constitution, and in particular, the right to just administrative action. And in this regard, the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act applies to us, as that act gives life to the right to just administrative action. There is also what is called the WTO agreement, the World Trade Organization agreement. South Africa is a member of the World Trade Organization. The agreement itself does not apply directly to ITAC, but ITAC's actions may result in the country being found to be in breach of its obligations under the WTO agreement. For that reason, we also make sure that our actions do not cause that situation to arise, and we keep to the right side of the agreement. For that reason, it is important that I refer to certain basic principles that have been implicated or are implicated by our current work in our contribution to the fight against COVID-19. These principles are as follows. Get Article 1, which is the general most favored nation treatment. Essentially, what that principle says is that if South Africa, as a member of the WTO, must treat all other members of the WTO equally. So it's not allowed to favor one member over another, except in certain circumstances that are permitted by the WTO agreement. Article 3, the national treatment on internal taxation and regulation. That principle basically says the goods that are produced elsewhere that come into the South African economy must be treated the same as the goods that are produced.
Chair.
Yes.
Can we ask the Commissioner to switch off his video because his sound quality is very poor?
Yeah,
Chair?
Yes, I've switched off.
Chair?
Okay.
If I may?
Yeah. Andre?
There has been a request, because the meeting is broadcast live, Chair, that the video, I know there's a challenge, but if the committee, that the video of the person making presentation remains on, but if we can't hear, I think we just have to switch it off. But I just thought I'd alert the committee that there has been a request that the video of the person presenting should remain on. But if members can't hear, they can fully understand why not.
Yeah. No, I think that's in order. Where because we need to hear the presentation. Okay. If ever there are problems, I think the advice was to say switch off your video when your voice is actually affected, because it improves it. Okay. No, thank you. As last option, we will make sure that at least the video switch off so that we can hear the presentation. Yes. Chief Commissioner,
thank you, Chairperson.
Proceed. Yeah.
With the guidance, with your guidance and that of the technicians, I've switched off my video. Yes. And I hope that improves the sound quality.
Definitely. Should.
The second principle under the WTO agreement, which is one of the founding principles, is the equal treatment, national treatment of goods for internal taxation and regulation. In other words, goods that are produced in a foreign country that are sold in the South African market must be treated the same as similar goods that are produced in South Africa. So, for instance, you can't discriminate against German beer being sold in South Africa, either by taxing it more or by regulating it, by treating it differently to how you treat Castle Lager that's produced locally. The last important principle is the one which is meant to facilitate free movement of goods, i.e. free trade, which is the principal purpose of forming the WTO, the general elimination of quantitative restrictions. In other words, countries, members of the WTO, are not allowed to unduly restrict the movement of goods. As I said at the beginning, these are all principles that are affected by ITAC's conduct in the present circumstances. As honorable members are aware, on the 15th of March, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs declared a state of national disaster, as a result of which one of the key tasks that arose for ITAC was to ensure that the goods that are unnecessary for the fight or for the fight against COVID-19 are available in sufficient quantities. That means that goods that are produced locally in South Africa, which are required for COVID-19, were then restricted in terms of their movement, and goods that are produced outside South Africa that were coming into South Africa were then favored to facilitate their entry into the country. Having said that, members, I would then like to move to the next slide.
You moved it back and front, so maybe you can move it again. The next slide. Chief Commissioner. Are we still having the Chief Commissioner? Slide number 6, we move to 7. Andre, are we still having the Commissioner? If you can check.
We still have him, Chair, on the system. It doesn't look like he has.
He's not muted. Chief Commissioner?
Chair, I think he has left. Chair, I think we propose that we move on and we'll deal with behind the scenes to resolve the problem, Chair.
Okay. No, my apologies. I think DG, I think we can actually then proceed. Can you ask technician just to check as well what makes it break and close in that way? But for now, I think let's actually move to our next presentation. DG.
Okay,
sure
thanks.
Then ask you to proceed.
Thanks, Chair. And then according to instruction, I'll deny you my good looks and proceed with a voice-only presentation. Chair, the fourth quarter report, I'll be very brief, and as we're loading the presentation, as you know, we kick off with an economic overview. Then I immediately go in to a summary of the actual performance, and then we conclude with a financial performance to date. As they're loading, if we kick off with the first slide, which really gives us an overview of the global economy. And as I said, we have all been following the news very closely, but according to the IMF and the World Bank, global growth is predicted to be negative growth, -3%. And as you can see, there's a number of risks facing the global economy, in addition to the fact that the pandemic is panning out to be much worse than was initially expected, especially in our major markets, such as the United States and Europe, and especially in the United Kingdom, which is our one of our big markets within the EU. So, and then in addition to that, a number of the large markets are also facing a lot of domestic issues, including China, Hong Kong, the US, and so on. And this is having, so in general, the impact is going to be negative at a global level. The only positive news on the horizon is that everybody expects a very quick rebound still in 2021 for the global economy. If we turn to the next slide, we then turn to our own, to the domestic front. And there again, we can see that we started off in this quarter, especially, which we are referring to, we started with 2 quarters of negative growth. So we didn't go into the pandemic with a very robust economy, and we had negative growth of 0.6% in the third quarter of 2019, and then a further contraction of 1.4%. So as we can see, it was in the final quarter of 2019, generally there was a slowing down of economic activity in the electricity industry, manufacturing and transport. And then for the first time also, which doesn't bode well, is that it's the first time in December, in the last quarter of the year, that we saw negative growth. If we turn to the next slide, as I said, we base this just on the official figures, but the IMF, World Bank, predicts that for this year, we would be having a negative growth rate of -5.8%. And again, the only positive thing on the horizon at this stage is that they do still expect a quick recovery of 4% in 2021. As I said, the Reserve Bank is slightly more pessimistic and or realistic, whatever term you want to use, but they predict -7% negative GDP growth. I think the general prognosis is that we do expect negative growth, and we need to be proactive by trying to reduce the extent of the economic slowdown. So that's just the global, the domestic. If we then turn to the next slide, we deal with gross fixed capital formation, which is really investment by the public and private sectors. And again, there is that except for the one quarter in 2019, we generally, despite the slowing GDP growth, the really positive thing was that private investment has really held up, except for this one quarter. But so generally, private sector investment in a broad range of sectors has been positive in terms of our domestic economy. And the real weakness has really been government spending, which has been declining -17%. And as you know, the key predictor of growth is what is really gross domestic fixed investment. That is really the predictor for future growth. So our key aim will be to revive both public and private investment, and you will see it later on in the other slides. I won't go into the next 2 slides very much, but it's really about the employment situation. And again, whilst in 2019, job growth, or in that quarter, job growth has been positive. If we go to the next slide, colleagues, then you will see that there was positive growth, but on the year as a whole, the job growth was negative. And I won't go into details, but let's just say that there was significant job challenges. The positive issue in our GDP, both for Q4 2019 and for the whole of 2019, is that we have been able to, for the overcome one of our key constraints, which is we developed a trade surplus. That means that our exports exceeded our imports, and we had a positive trade balance of 23 billion in that quarter. But on the whole, we have been moving very positively. Our exports to both Asia and to Europe has increased, and also there was an increase in platinum and other international prices. So on the trade surplus front, there is the positive news. Similarly, on the next slide, you will see we're also running a very healthy trade balance with the rest of the continent, and where in the Q4 we had a trade surplus of 93 billion rand, or let's say exports amounted to 93 billion rand, imports 41 billion, and therefore a trade surplus of 51 billion rand. So in general, our trade is very positive with the continent, especially about 80% of the products is manufactured and value-added, beneficiated products, and that is a positive balance. But as I said, it is not also sustainable for the other countries, because you need to have a bit more balanced trade. That means we must both import from our neighbors and if we want to continue to export, but at least that is a positive sign in our overall economic policy framework. And then, as I said, if we turn finally to the BRICS situation, again, in this area we have a negative trade balance, and there, as you know, our main goal with regards to China and others is to attract higher levels of investment from these countries, so that we also do not just become an importer of value-added products, but we really use it as an exporter of value-added products, like we have done with the bike and the automotive investment from China. We then become an export platform rather than just an importer. So that's the overall economic overview. I then turn to what are we going to do, which is the key government interventions, before coming to the actual quarterly report. And here, if we look at the key government interventions, as we know, our main work going forward, and especially now that we've moved to level 3 yesterday, is the actual implementation of the 500 billion economic recovery package. This will be the core part of our work. And as we're revising our APPs and our strategic plan, our big focus will be the full implementation of the recovery package. We are also working very vigorously on getting implementation of the master plans, the automotive sector master plan, the poultry master plan, the retail and clothing. And as we know, these sectors have incurred some setbacks during the lockdown period, where a number of exports didn't take place and domestic consumption declined. So we're going to put a lot into revitalizing the master plans. There's the energy plan, and then also we are following up on all the investment commitments. So Investment SA is very active, that we did at the conference last year. We are also focusing, if we go to the next slide, on getting the work completed around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As we know, that was supposed to kick in 1st of July. The work program is now being worked on, and we hope by the end of this year, we will be implementing fully the Continental Free Trade Area. And the rest is our programs, which we are continuing: the reimagined industrial strategy, the special economic zone, and the Black Industrialist Program. Just today and last week, we spent a lot of time on reviving the work around the special economic zones and the industrial parks, as most of production comes back under level 3. If I then turn to the quarterly program, I'm not going to repeat the next slide, which is basically our strategic plan. But again, as we are all familiar with what that is, which is basically we want to industrialize, we want to transform the economy, we want to make it a fair marketplace, a fair regulatory environment, and we want to build a capable state and a professional civil service which can underpin our growth strategy. Then, if we turn to our strategic goals, the committee, Honourable Chair, you're familiar with these ones, but as I said, this just sets it up around which our quarterly performance indicators. But the first one, and we will go through each one, our strategic goal 1 is to facilitate transformation, to build exports, broad-based empowerment, fair regulation, and the capable DTIC. So if we look at our targets set out there, we've achieved about 60 to 70% of our targets, and in a number of areas like administration, special economic zones, we have completed and met our target. But as you will see, there is a variance in our targets, and I will explain that later. But most of it arises from, as you know, the final month of this quarterly report was March, was when, as you know, the lockdown started, but also we had cancelled a number of trips in February to a number of countries. So the export side declined quite considerably. So those, I'll take you then through each of the targets. If we kick off with industrial development, and as you know, this is our overarching program and the sort of core of DTIC's work. And here again, we're very proud to say, and I think Honourable Tring keeps reminding us as a champion of beneficiation, in this quarter, we really launched South Africa's first commercial fuel cell manufacturing facility in the Dube Trade Port, SEZ. This company has already started production and has already started supplying Vodacom and other telecom operators with contracts in terms of using, as I said, locally, the beneficiation platinum fuel cells production. So this is a project we've been working on for the past maybe 5-6 years. We're pursuing it, but it really got to a stage where the company made an actual investment. And this is a Taiwanese company that we managed to attract and work with. Then if we turn to the other part, which is really the agro-processing sector, a key sector because of its labor intensity. Here, under that master plan, we saw decisive action by the minister in that we imposed a 62% bone-in chicken tariff on the bone-in chicken and 42% on boneless portions. But this was quite an important intervention because, as you know, lots of chicken was being, poultry was being dumped in our market, and we've been able to start curbing that. Then also the other sector we see growth in, especially for the sugar industry, which members are familiar with, but the biofuels regulatory framework was also approved in this quarter, and in this we incorporated sugarcane as one of the products. And as you know, part of that master plan is to revive, to use sugar in the biofuel sector. And then similarly, Makamisa Foods is also a local producer with strong local content and using local raw materials. We launched that project as well. And launched a buy local campaign for our agro-processing sector. Also, Darling Sweets opened its products, and as you know, we link companies to the domestic market, and here Spar and other retailers was brought into them to provide a boost to Darling Sweet. Then if we turn to the if we move on from this slide and go to the next one, which is really industrial development. If I just pause here, we can see that this is our incentives and industrial financing division. Here we supported 120 enterprises. We protected, we retained 9,900 jobs, created new jobs, over 1,800, and then we unlocked or co-invested 1.7 billion from the private sector, and then we also did 10 interventions to support black industrialists. Now, it's those sector you will see that the companies who were going to invest, they didn't invest the full amount of their what they were supposed to, and we saw a decline then in the amount of incentives they were entitled to. And this is one of the key performance indicators which you can see was not met. But as I said, those companies who did, we did make available the incentives to them. But there is a decline in the investment requests. Then if we turn to the next area, which again we saw a dramatic drop, which is in the trade investment, in the export front. If we go to the next slide, you will see here that we are below the target of that. But despite not meeting the target with regards to export sales, as I indicated, we had to cancel a number of trade missions, and the DTIC moved quite early before even the lockdown because we got indications from the other countries that it wasn't safe for companies to travel. So, but we did in January and February, we assisted 160 companies under the EMEA program. This is mainly small and medium sized companies. We also did implement, at least we met this target, which is our investment pipeline, 19 billion, and the target was 15 billion. So that proceeded quite well. We also did the training for companies, 168 companies from our Global Exporter Passport program. And then we did various capacity building workshops. As I said, we continued our work by exposing companies to the global marketplace, big emphasis on the Middle East and on the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and those countries. And here we took companies, 33 countries to the United Arab Emirates. And here we assist the bigger companies. Many of them go on their own finances, but the smaller companies benefit from our export marketing scheme. Then if we go to the next slide, we see how we also conducted a trade mission to Germany, and 16 SMMEs participated in this, and they got substantial, at least export order when we were still able to go there. And then the other area of work that we carried on in the investment front is, as you know, we've got a big partnership with the World Bank, and working very closely with them to raise our to make it easier for companies to operate, to cut out some of the red tape. And we've done 6 technical working group meetings held. This includes municipalities, the deeds office, and so on. And then we had sensitization work with different sectors around this. And then, as I indicated on the next slide, you will also just see some examples. I won't go into them, but as I said, a big focus because of the high demand for, especially for products from our agro-processing and SMME sector in the Middle East. We went there. Then also a visit to Russia, which saw a big uptake of especially our citrus products. Then the chair, if we turn to the next slide, which is really the work around the continental free trade area. And as you know, this was our priority, and a lot of work was spent on this. And we are really proud to announce that our chief negotiator, who negotiated and did a number of presentations to yourselves, Mr. Wamkele Mene, he was elected unanimously as the Secretary General of the Secretariat. He's now based in Accra, and he will be driving the operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area, and so we will be fully aligned and working very closely with him in that regard. So that is our key work, but we also did a trade mission on the next slide to Thailand, which is a small but a growing market for us, especially for some of we're going to cooperate, especially on agro-processing and on the automotive sector as well. Then also we've been supporting the minister and the president with regards to the work in the G20 and opening up opportunities there. And then similarly, we have put in work with the United States. The United States is still a key market, very key market for us, again, for manufactured products. And we try to secure our rights within the GSP generalized system of preferences. And we also had to undertake a trip to the US just to explain to them the content of our copyright bills and our performer protection bills. If we then turn on the next slide to our other big part of our program, which is strategic goal 3, which is broad-based empowerment and special economic zones. And as you know, we are working with the 10 SEZs and the 26 plus industrial parks. So we are trying to create some cohesion and get all tiers of government, provinces, municipalities to be fully engaged with this program. We therefore convened a national workshop where we invited all the special economic zones, all the provinces we held it at Kucha in the Eastern Cape, and this was really to give momentum and support to our special economic zone program. We also focusing on our new applications, which is the one in the Eastern Cape, Wild Coast, around the Lusikisiki area. Then we've got East London, the expansion there of the Berlin site, and then the Northern Cape work around the Namakwa SEZs. And then, as I said, we also been working on Bojanala and on Malutia Pofong, and then on in Mpumalanga. Then if we turn to the BEE work, big focus was on youth empowerment, and 3,600 young youth was employed under this program, and we assisted, it's on the next slide, we assisted 154 companies with the YES program. This is an important catalyst for linking up young people to the world of work and giving them, we give companies who participate in this program, we allow them to move one level up if they take on 5% of employment of 5% of their payroll for young people. Then we also assisted companies, the SMMEs, with very easy to register with CIPC and get the BE certificates, which then can facilitate their access to markets. And that is a quick and easy way of doing it via the CIPC BE facility. And then we also conducted a number of workshops on BEE. Then in the next slide, you will see how, especially amongst the US companies, there's a lot of take-up. If you recall, with Caterpillar, with Amazon, and now with JP Morgan, we also signed a equity equivalent investment program, and this will allow JP Morgan now to help Black-owned enterprises with financial support, but also with technology and new opening up economic opportunities for them. That's the BE. Then if I turn then to the next slide, which is our industrial parks program, we continue our upgrade of the industrial parks, but we are also trying to locate the digital hubs in our industrial parks. We're busy with one in Isitebe, and then we also completed the refurbishment in Botshabelo in the Free State. And then we're also doing municipal support programs in the city of Tshwane, and then one in Babelege, near Hammanskraal. And then we also connected the Vulindlela. We did a further upgrade in Vulindlela, was approved, and we linked it to the presidential district model. It falls in the Vulindlela Park near Mthatha. It falls in the Awartambo district. Then finally, Chair, on industrial parks, we've also been able to register our industrial parks with a global eco initiative, and so the UNIDO, we are getting support now from United Nations Industrial Development Organization and the Swiss Economic Cooperation to also start drawing more and more resources to this critical intervention. And then as I draw closer to conclusion, we then turn to legislation and regulation, which is the other strategic pillar. And here we did work around the Companies Amendment Bill, which will be one of the main pieces of legislation for this year. And that was concluded, the NEDLAC process. After many long debates with business and labor, it was finally approved in March. Similarly, we are still awaiting the outcome of the President's proclamation with regards to whether he will be signing the Copyright Amendment Bill and the Performance Protection Amendment Bill, which we know, thank you, honourable members who were part of that, this bill was adopted by both the House and the NCOP. And then we continued making interventions, or we did not, as I indicated, with maintaining our preferential access to the US market. Substantial amount of work was put into making representation to the USTR, and we attended the GSP hearings in Washington. And then if I turn finally to the final strategic goal, which is our administration, which, as I said, is really one of the pillars of we need an effective DTIC to be able to deliver on our program. And here we maintained our positive track record, 100% creditor payments. Women in senior management position, 54% against a target of 50%. Number of people with disabilities, 3.9% against a target of 3.7%. And then, as you can see, very low turnover rates because DTIC hopefully remains highly motivated. But we've met all our KPIs for this area of administration. If I can quickly then turn to the reasons for the variance. If we look at that, it's the investment and incentives. We had fewer applications because lower investment values was received for that quarter because of the downturn, COVID-19, and as I said, less jobs resulted, and therefore less incentive was given. There was also a decline in the value of exports that were generated on our trade missions because we cancelled then a number of trade missions. We had cancelled Brazil, Algeria, Tunisia, India were cancelled, and then also a international business mission to Europe was also cancelled. And then, as I said, those are the main reasons for the variance. But we achieved the bulk of our targets. And then finally, Chair, is our budget. And you're very familiar with this, but because it is the final quarter for the 2019-2020 financial year, we can then give the full year to date, which is, as you know, our budget was 10 billion rand. Expenditure was 9.9 billion rand. That means we achieved our target of less than 2% underspending, but we are still disappointed in the variance, that 1.14 variance. And that is mainly, as I said, because of the underspending, because of the last months of the quarter, where there was underspending in the incentives program. Chair, that is basically the next two slides, just give you a breakdown, but honourable members are quite familiar with this now. The bulk of our, as you know, we've got 13 entities, and we make transfers to them, and then, but the biggest bulk is then incentives, which we give directly to the private sector if they undertake investments, and there it was over 5 billion. That's our performance, and as I said, we spent over 98% of our budget, and the reasons for the slight variance of why we didn't achieve 100% spending is for the reasons outlined in that slide. Chair, I can want to then thank you. The next presentation will be done by Dr. Molefe Pule. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG. Dr. Pule.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the members of the Portfolio Committee for having us for Q4. I will go through the Economic Development Department's Q4 report, and I'm supported by Irene Ramafola, who will go through the HR and the finance slides towards the latter part of the presentation. And thank you, DG.
Chair.
Hermans?
I just want to check with Dr. Pule whether he also has network problems. Otherwise, he must show us his face, please. And South Africa also wants to see his face. Thank you.
Doctor, the whip would like to see people. So please show yourself. If you can't, then we'll actually confirm the challenges of the technology. So she doesn't mind if it's technology inconvenience. Doctor, you try that.
I believe I'm showing myself now, Chair. I hope I'm visible.
Okay, I can't see you. That's fine, but I see the presentation, Doctor.
Oh, perhaps because the presentation
but
is on.
The issue is just have your video on.
Yes, Chair.
So obviously, if ever there are problems, then we'll actually amend that.
Noted.
But have
my
your video on. Yeah.
Thank you. My video is on, Chair. So
wonderful. Great.
Thank you, Chair. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll go through the Economic Development Department presentation for Q4, and Ms. Irene Ramafola will assist on the human resources and the financial slides towards the latter part of the presentation. Ordinarily, Chair, you will recall, and members will recall that, because of two separate presentations, there would be an economic section, but now we have merged, and there's one introductory section which the DG has done now. On the EDD Q4, we had a underachievement of 7 products for Q4. However, we should note, Chair, that overall for the year, having reconciled, as Chair would be aware and members would be aware, we are currently preparing the finalization of our annual reports. We have overachieved on all our products for the year by 10 products. Therefore, I think this is a testament, Chair, members, of the work that was done previously in previous quarters. Members will recall that during this quarter and the Q before, which is Q3, October to December 2019, EDD was in the throngs of the merger with DTI, and that was an element that made us anticipate that we should work harder in Q3 in anticipation of the merger and most of our energies and some of our resources being directed to that. I think the work that was then done in Q3, Chair, helped us to be able to overall achieve our targets. Q4, apart from the work around the combination of EDD and DTI, COVID did happen, as the DG indicated, during the latter part of the quarter in March. However, I think part of our issue was really around the merger, as well as we had also purposefully redirected some of our resources from Q3 to make up for some of the KPIs where we felt we were lacking. Nonetheless, of the 16 key performance areas for the year, in Q4, 15 of them were active. KPI 1 is not active in Q4, as that KPI refers to the audit findings, which is achieved in quarter 2 and quarter 3, actually. So of the 67 planned products, we got 60, and our budget spent as allocated is 98%. If I may move to the next slide. So what I will do now, Chair, is I'll pick up on some of the highlights for the quarter under review, Q4, and there are 5 buckets of highlights that we wanted to share and report to the portfolio committee. The first one relates to the COVID-19 regulations which Minister issued. The second one relates to the introduction of the export tax announcement that was made by the Minister of Finance during the budget speech during the Q under review. The third one relates to the price discrimination and buyer power regulations, as well as 4 relates to investments in investment infrastructure and blockings. And finally, the social economy policy. Before I move on to the next slide, I would like to point out, Chair and the committee, that these highlights relate and are linked to the comments that the portfolio committee made in their quarter 3 report. In the quarter 3 report of the portfolio committee, in relation to our Q3 presentation and report, there were 3 large buckets of work that the portfolio committee zoomed in on. Number 1 related to illicit trade and the need to ensure that the pushback against illicit trade activity is kept up. So that relates to export tax introduction, which is highlighted as 2 in this slide. The second issue that the Portfolio Committee mentioned in the Q3 report related to the social economy policy framework. The Portfolio Committee welcomed that work. However, they noted the importance of keeping up and ensuring that we ensure that that work keeps momentum. That relates to highlight number 5 in that slide. The last of the 3 that the Portfolio Committee mentioned in their Q3 PC report related to encouraging and pointing out the necessity for us to work with the specifically mentioned in the PC report was the Department of Small Business Development as regards SMMEs and malls and townships. Now, this relates largely to work around the Competition Amendment Act, as well as making sure that we realize practical, realizable benefits on the ground coming out of those regulations. On this slide, the work highlighted in highlight 3 relates to that. So we can see what we've tried to do here, Chair, members of the PC, is to review the guidance that the PC had previously provided and ensure that our work is aligned to the priorities that the Portfolio Committee felt were important for our Q4 work. If I may move on. On the next slide, Chair, we come to a highlight of the COVID-19 regulations. The Portfolio Committee has received briefings during the COVID national pandemic from various stakeholders, the Competition Commission, I believe ITAC was to do now, and they shall do latter part of this session. And essentially, that some of the work that those entities were doing was on the back of the regulations that the minister published. As an illustration, the Portfolio Committee did have a session with the Competition Commission as well as the National Consumer Commission as regards the price gouging activity, which relates directly to the first regulation mentioned there, the Consumer Protection and National Disaster Regulation, which enabled and then facilitated closer working relationships between the Commission and the NCC. They ordinarily work together in the normal course of their work, but as regards in the price gouging, that was an enabler. Of course, there were other regulations mentioned there regarding the healthcare sector, banking, retail, hotel, as well as export control. Now, all of these regulations, as published and gazetted by the minister, entailed part of them, as members will be aware, entailed consultation with various departments in ensuring that applicable sections of the Competition Act are not abused through these regulations. For instance, for any exemption in the healthcare sector, the department and the Minister of Health would have to be consulted, banking would be finance, and so on and so forth. So that is one key element that was important during Q4 to the latter part in response to the national pandemic. On the next slide, Chair, members of the Portfolio Committee, it's a summary of the work done around the export tax. As we are aware, during the budget speech, the Minister of Finance announced measures being put in place towards the introduction of an export tax. And therefore, the PPS, preference price system, was then extended until the end of the current calendar year, while we allow the finalization of process at National Treasury. Reports indicate to us that this work is proceeding. We are anticipating that Treasury shall, COVID allowing and other scheduling requirements allowing, propose specific amendments to the MINCOM BUD, which should sit ordinarily around the month of October. So that is a key achievement in terms of the export tax, and public consultations as National Treasury reports have already been had on that, and are being considered and would be looked at as part of finalization of that process. The next slide, Chair, members of the PC, brings us to the issue of price discrimination and the buyer regulations, and this is essentially one of the key work that's been done in implementing the Competition Amendment Act, which was passed previously. And obviously, this links then, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, Chair, members of the Portfolio Committee, relates to the comment that the Portfolio Committee had previously made, in that it's critical that as we proceed, we ensure that there's sufficient alignment between the work and the achievements that have been done in the competition environment with relevant departments such as the Department of Small Business Development. So apart from the publication of these regulations during the month of February, Chair, we continue and we've already started work with the Department of Small Business. As members of the Portfolio Committee are aware, one of the branches in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, led by DG October now, is Competition Policy and Economic Planning. That branch is currently seized with work aligning and ensuring that we've got practical coordination between ourselves as the DTIC on the back of regulations such as these and various stakeholders. This is obviously got the one current financial year work, which will be reported in this queue, but suffice to say for now, Chair, that we are engaged with the Department of Small Business. We're engaged, for instance, with the Department of Cooperative Governance. We're engaged with SARS around the issue of spaza shops, SMMEs, and ensuring that HDIs, which these regulations refer to, and ensuring that we practically implement these regulations. So this was, I think the important part here is two things. There's two elements. The one is it links to previously achieved work in the Amendment Act, and secondly, it's a stepping stone towards practical realizations of the provisions of that act in a practical and tangible way, working with our sister departments. On the next slide, Chair, Portfolio Committee members, we've got the investment in infrastructure and blockings as one of the highlights. Now, obviously, based on the portfolio, on the earlier slides, there are various unblockings and investments that we did. I'm using these just to highlight, again, critically, on the back of major settlement agreements and other work done, we have, as the Economic Development Department during the Q under review, managed to take forward the work and ensure that we realize it. Two examples come to mind. The Rhodes Food Group managed to get into the Walmart supply value chain in the US, so to export to the US, as well as the Glenmart factory exporting what we would refer to as Christmas crackers, but in some environments they're not just used but also as party crackers. So they've got both of those come out of the supply development program that was part of the MESMAT deal. This is one of good cases, I believe, in terms of the collaboration between government, findings of the commission, as well as private sector, in ensuring that some of these agreements are realized in a practical and tangible way. Another critical unblocking now the latter two would be investments. The next one is more an illustration of infrastructure unblocking, where work was done to assist Mondi with a statutory inspection delay in order to allow them to continue to produce pulp, which is a critical input towards toilet paper, which is an essential project during lockdown. So this happened in the latter part of the quarter as well. The final slide, Chair, before Ms. Ramafola comes in with HR and finance, relates to a key policy work that we have reported to the Portfolio Committee to previously, and we are continuing to finalize. We are now in the run-up essentially towards the finalization of this key piece of work, the social economic policy work, which by way of recollection, members will remember is being done on the back of a memorandum of understanding which was tabled in Parliament according to constitutional requirements between the government of South Africa, represented by the then Economic Development Department and now DTIC, as well as the government of Flanders and the ILO. And on the basis of which a draft green paper is currently in consultation. We have reported previously that we went into provincial consultations where we spoke to over 1,000 community members in all 9. Now, we are conscious, Chair, members of the PC, that public consultations are a process that you really can never really stop consulting. But of course, at some point, you have to take the next step. Where we are now during the Q under review, Q4, the key work that was done in this was, one, we managed to agree with our funders to further give the project a bit more time. Now, the reason for that, Chair, was that we felt, and our partners agreed with us, having gone through consultations with community structures and various other specialized groups such as academics and lawyers and the like, it's important for us to also have a thorough and a deep engagement with provincial leadership. In that, social economy organizations, needless to say, function largely within, well, completely within communities, and therefore it's important. And this is a tangible policy project that has to come up with tangible benefits towards economic growth. And therefore, it's critical that provincial leadership is well vested and well appraised in terms of where the policy is. Prior to the lockdown, led by Deputy Minister Nomalungelo Gina, we had engaged with the leadership of the Free State, the MEC, responsible for economic development, among other portfolios such as tourism, as well as the Premier in the Northern Cape. We were planning to engage with the Northwest when we then had to go into the lockdown. Now, post, and in fact, in the next week or two, the hope and the plan is to engage with the Northwest Province as well as the KwaZulu-Natal Province. We are planning, with the leadership of our Deputy Minister, of course, to go to the rest of the 9 provinces. And the idea, essentially, as I said, is to ensure that the provincial leadership is well versed on what this policy is about, and we get further input to supplement the input that we got from community structures. Another important portion of this work, Chair, members of the PC, was, if you will, fortuitous in that with the COVID lockdown, we then became part of an interdepartmental task team led by the relevant ministers, coordinated by the Minister and the Department of Employment and Labour, in which we are looking at how we can leverage and position and work with and support the social economy organizations towards, 1, supporting initiatives around COVID, of course, but 2, essentially, how do we leverage this partnership with our sister departments to make sure that we then have a sustainable social economy environment based on the policy, and linking with the key work that other departments are doing. There's key work being done in this environment by various departments. Small businesses is one of them. Public Works, COCTA, and various other government departments are doing key work in the social environment. So therefore, during this quarter, Chair, we have taken the unfortunate pandemic and worked on that to build further on the partnership. So that is the work that was done around the social economy policy. We are working to ensure that we have a product before the end of the project, as agreed with the funders, Chair. Chair and PC members, those brief comments essentially give a sense of Q4 insofar as it relates to the core work. I'll ask Ms. Ramafola to please share, with your indulgence, go through the HR as well as the finance slides for EDD. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CEO, CFO.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our DG, Dr. Fule, and honorable members. Chair, I'll be very quick. The slide that you see in front of you, this explains the personnel expenditure that we incurred as a department for that quarter. You will see that when you look at that slide, we had an average cost per employee sitting at around 200,000. We increased our number of employees slightly compared to the previous quarters. This was to support the social economy that Dr. Pule was just explaining just now. If I can move on to the next slide. Chairperson, if you look at the next slide, in terms of gender equity, as a department, we have achieved our target of 50%. We are actually sitting at 62% in terms of females within the entire department. However, if you look at SMS, we're sitting at 54%, which is still above the target, which has been set of 50%, Chairperson. Can I move to the next slide? Thank you. Chairperson, as at the end of the financial year, the department had spent 966.3 million out of our allocated budget of 989.6, which translates to 98% of the budget. So we have worked quite extensively in managing the budget to ensure that we don't overspend at all or we don't significantly underspend, to make sure that we stay within a margin of 2%, Chairperson, and we've been able to do that. I do need to highlight on point number 2 that the vast majority of that amount relates to transfers which are given to entities, that 840.8 million, Chairperson. So meaning the department's direct spend was actually 125.5, Chairperson. Chair, on that third bullet, just quickly to highlight on that, if you look at the core and you look at the support, the biggest chunk of our 125 was coming from the support, which is the administration. But it's not necessarily because we had more people in administration. It's actually more because we house a lot of our expenditure within administration, such as our rental, such as our legal services. A lot of goods and services sit within administration. Hence, you see that slight disparity, Chairperson. Chair, I will move on to the next slide. Thank you. Chairperson, the next slide just explained the expenditure, the split in the expenditure between the programs. So we've got the administration, there's growth path, second program, and then investment and competition. And then we've also shown what our transfers to the transfers and subsidies to the entities are. And then overall, as a department alone, we spent 89%. This also talks to this underspending that took place also in Q4, which Dr. Pule explained quite extensively. But overall, as a department, including the transfers, our spending was sitting at 98%, Chairperson. Chair, can I move to the next slide? Chair, on the next slide, you'll see that our biggest contributor to our expenses, apart from our transfers, it's the compensation of employees, Chairperson, and then you will see that on that line item, that's where we had a much bigger variance compared to the other variances. And the reason for that, we had a few resignations in the department, Chairperson. Also, our ceiling was slightly higher compared to the previous financial year, Chairperson. And also in anticipation of the merger with the DTI, we were a bit reluctant to fill certain posts before the year ended. Chairperson, another part which contributed to, on the next slide, please, which contributed to the spending being at 98% as opposed to probably 99.9, for example, is transfers that relate to the Tirisano Fund. We had one of our companies that was not able to make payments into the revenue fund and resulted in us not being able to transfer that money into the IDC, who are the trust administrator. So, Chairperson, that slide just explains our variances. The underspending is that some resignations, and also on goods and services, Chairperson, we were anticipating that we'll get some invoices that we're waiting for from State Attorney. There was a lot of work that was done towards the end of the year, and we're still waiting for those invoices to come through. And they only came through in the current financial year. Chairperson, that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, as CFO. So can we then allow the members of the committee to take comments, questions for clarity, and let's actually hear Secretariat.
Chair, Mr. Thring, Chair, wish to pose the questions.
Honorable Thring will be the first member. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, yeah, just a few questions to our DG from DTIC. Slide 6 of the presentation shows that your gross fixed capital formation has dipped by some 10% in the fourth quarter. Real capital expenditure by general government declined 17.6%, and the private business enterprise declined by some 10.3%. Simple question is, what do you attribute this to, noting in particular that some government departments are incapable of spending their budgets, particularly capital budgets? So what do you attribute this challenge that we have with the gross fixed capital formation dipping by some 17%? Then slide 11 speaks to our trade deficit of 26 billion with our BRICS partners in the fourth quarter. This, however, seems to be a perennial problem. It seems to be a consistent problem, particularly over the last 5 years. What is being done to reduce this deficit, the trade deficit with our BRICS partners, as it also impacts on our dismal unemployment figures? And then to Mr. Pule, the small business and informal sector have been decimated by COVID-19. Some predictions that we could lose some 100, on the optimistic side, 1 million to 3 million jobs post-COVID-19 pandemic. So many of these businesses were under strain. The SMME businesses appear to be, some of them appear to be overtaken by foreigners, particularly the spaza shops, cell phone shops, and hairdressing sector. So these are challenges that our small business informal sectors actually face. My simple question is, what initiatives and programs has your department over the last few years implemented to assist the small business, SMMEs, and the informal sector? Thank you.
Thank you. The next member,
Chair, Mr. Mulder, Chair.
Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretariat. My question is not necessarily on specific slide. I've got a question for DG Mr. October, also for CE Dr. Pule. As far as variances is concerned, and also with reference to Honourable Thring's comment on the differentiations, lots has been mentioned in the presentations and the influence that COVID-19 has got on the department, especially during the last quarter. That's under review now. But I want to ask the following to both the gentlemen. Would you say that the fact that South Africa has been downgraded by the major 3 credit bureaus in the world, has that got any influence on the variances? Because there's no mention being made in any of the presentations, so specifically as far as the downgrading is concerned. And then the second question to see if the CFO, especially referring with reference to slide number 51, gender equity. You know, I've been sitting in committees for years, and especially then in this committee where gender equality has been regarded as a very important factor. Now my question is, how did it happen that the department exceeded the gender equity target of 50% to come to 54%, 65% and 62%? My question is that fair? How did the department achieve that? Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Chair?
Next. Yes,
Mr. Cuthbert, Chair.
Honourable Cuthbert.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I've got a couple of general questions and comments that I would like to make. The first one is, we weren't explained to what happened to Mr. Mondi Tom, the acting DDG for the Economic Development Department. Usually he presents on behalf of the department, and it's rather strange that there wasn't an apology afforded on his behalf or some sort of explanation as to why another individual took over the presentation on his behalf. So that I would like to ascertain, and whether or not there's implications by virtue of both of the departments being merged that certain people have been phased out of the department. Then the second question and comment I would like to make, Chair, is directly to Mr. October, and that is what is going on with IDAD, Chairperson. In the third quarter, they performed extremely poorly against their targets. In this particular quarter, they've only reached 1 out of 4 of their targets. And for some reason, in relation to written responses I received, I've got a feeling that it's because the DDG spends too much time on sabbatical leave instead of actually managing and running her department to ensure that it reaches its targets. I hold no grudges against anyone who wants to develop themselves and improve their skill set to be able to contribute towards a collective economic cause. But I do have a serious problem when senior staff members are on prolonged periods of leave and we sit with an economic crisis on our hands, Chairperson. Then my third comment, Chair, is I would like to just get an overview, and possibly if I could receive this in writing at a later stage, is what the level of vacancies are per department and also as the merged department of DTIC. There's some vague information regarding human resources in the presentation, and I'd like to specifically know where we are short of staff in this department and what measures are being taken to ensure that those particular positions are filled and that we are getting bang for taxpayers' buck in that respect, Chairperson. So if I can please get responses to those, I'd be very appreciative. Thank you, Chairperson.
The next
Chair?
member, yes.
Mrs. Hermans, Chair.
Honorable Hermans. Hermans.
Thank you, Chair. I was just busy unmuting. I think I have comments to make because the 2 departments that reported to us is now 1 department. And I think we did look at, and they did report on the amalgamation of the 2 departments, unless I am mistaken. But let me just make a general comment, Chair. You know, before COVID-19 hit us, this economy was already on a downward trajectory. So we therefore need a very strong and focused rebuilding of the economy. We need all role players in South Africa to come to the table to achieve this turnaround. We need to have a bigger focus, I think, on township and rural economies. COVID-19 has, of course, shone the spotlight on our huge areas of underdevelopment in this economy. And this has affected the poorest of the poor, our communities, people who are not able to fend for themselves. So as we reflect on the 4th quarter, we never thought that we'll be in a 1st quarter that looks the way it does today across the world and in South Africa in particular. So we ask that the new Department of Trade, Industry and Competition should drive the programs that we have and the interventions that we have at higher levels. We need to do things out of the box so that we turn things around for all South Africans. That's my comment, and thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. The next one, Andre.
Mr. Mbuyani, Chair.
Honorable Mbuyani.
Chairperson, thank you. I think I'm audible enough, Chairperson.
Yes, without your video, it sounds slightly okay. Continue.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me first welcome the both reports, Chairperson, from both departments. Maybe let me start from the DI. In terms of the 2 strategic goals, one is the one of the facilitation transformation and also the economic promotion in terms of the industrial development. I just wanted to check, Chairperson, because they are talking now of reimagining the industrial development. How does that affect the entire department in terms of facilitating the broader based economic development throughout economy.
Mbuyane?
Chair.
Yeah, just try and actually just move slower. Let's see if ever we can be able to hear you. You're crackling a bit, but continue.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Maybe in the first part I said I'm talking about the strategic goals, which is number 1 and number 2. I don't remember which slide, but they are talking of facilitating transformation in terms of the economy and promote industrial development. So I just wanted to check was now in terms of the reimagined industrial strategy, which talks to master plans and so forth. What is the status quo? And what is the participation in terms of the broad-based economic intervention to achieve inclusive growth? The last one to the DG, it's around the merger in dealing with the employment and creation, Chairperson. The shift in policy direction from the ITAC towards the emerging strategy. I'm not so sure whether I can pause to also to ITAC, because there was a presentation from ITAC, or continue, Chairperson.
Yeah, we'll do it under ITAC, Honorable Mbuyane. We can ask. Yes, we will actually get the presentation there. Yeah.
Then the last one, Chairperson, it's around the price discrimination and buyer power regulation in terms of the seeking to address the persistent, Chairperson. I wanted to check the benchmark for determining the application of the Section 1A. First, the own control and also the historical disadvantage individual. But the most important one, Chairperson, on those ones, I think, is the extension until the 31 December, the taxation law amendment. I think also if we can get more clarity on that one, so that we get participate as a PC, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Okay. The next member.
Chair. Ms. Mutaung, yes. Chair.
Honorable Mutaung.
Thanks, Chair. Let me welcome the presentation from 2 departments. I have few questions to the DG. DG, on the 4th quarter plan target, I can see under incentive development, the target was 4 and the achieved was 1. Can I get an explanation why was the target not been performed? And then secondly, on the YES program, under job creation, 3,660 of job was created. Can I get a percentage of women in that number? And then EDD, CFO, I just want to check how will the pandemic affect the impact of our fiscus? Secondly, the Tirisano Fund. It's for the second time I see they are the cause for the department not to perform their finances correctly. Is there anything that you can do or to assist that funding of Tirisano to perform their work properly? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next one, Andre.
Chair, I've noted no more questions, Chair, so the departments can respond, Chair.
Okay. Can I ask that we go back, DG and Dr. Pule? I don't know, in any order.
Chair, thank you. Chair, thank you again. I'll proceed with not showing the good looks. Chair, Honourable Tring, and I'll go through the questions systematically then. I think Honourable Tring has raised the question about the causes for the dramatic decline in gross domestic fixed investment. And as he correctly points out, the really big problem there is government spending, which includes municipal spending of minus 17%, and then SOE spending. So the biggest causes for that decline is, as I said, is the decline in state spending. The reasons for the SOE spending is well known. The problems faced by SAA, Eskom, Transnet, and others. But he's absolutely correct. The reason for the low government spending is mainly municipal spending and municipal infrastructure. And that is the cause of that decline. As I said, that is our Achilles heel, and it is the one thing we have to solve if we get the government's recovery package going, is that the capabilities of the municipalities must be spending, or the ability to be able to undertake infrastructure projects, and that is our big reason for the decline in GDFI, but also for the decline in GDP. That is the main cause of it. And then again, I think we've dealt with this issue before, but to reiterate, our positive trade balance at the overall level, but our trade deficit with China and the BRICS. The strategy we've put in place is firstly, it's twofold. The one strategy is to attract investment from China and to South Africa not just be a dumping ground, but a production base. And as you see there, we've attracted big investments from China, and we continue to. We've got, for example, Hisense in Atlantis producing TVs, household goods. We also managed to attract the Beijing automotive investment. We've attracted Mamba Cement. We've attracted into the telecom sector. So that's the one part, so that we export China exports from here. The second part of the strategy is to sell more value-added products. In addition to our raw materials, we want to sell value-added products. And on there, a number of trade missions has been undertaken, but we've also opened the market. For example, they've allowed us now to do more agricultural beef exports. They've allowed access for our beef, but also for other value-added products. So that is a way to reverse the trade balance with China. Honourable Mulder. Yes, I don't mention it there, but the downgrades, obviously the biggest impact immediately of the downgrades, which came about in March, is that it affects or it raises the cost of government borrowing, because as you know, we have to pay more for our government debt. So that's the immediate effect. But of course, the overall climate is affected, the confidence of investors is affected by your downgrades, and so that is obviously, you see that in the cutback in investment in both the last quarter of 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. So it has an overall impact on that. On Honourable Cuthbert's point, I take it again, this is above my pay grade, but if I could just say that from what I understand is from 1st of April, Mr. Monday Tom's contract did come to an end, and therefore he is no longer in the employ of DTIC, and that is the reason. And because, as I indicated, we are dealing with legacy reports here, and this will be the last time we present reports of the former entities, and that is why Dr. Pule is standing in, because he was one of the senior employees in EDD, and he replaces it. But Mr. Monday Tom is no longer with the department. And then to follow up on that, we will, as I said, when we give the first quarter report for the DTIC, which is the next report we will be giving, which is from the 1st April to June. Then I think we will give a full update then on the question of the staffing levels. We've completed the what we call the NMOG the National Macro Organization of the state, which we're dealing with very closely with the presidency and the DPSA. And there we will give a full update on the amalgamation, number of employees we now have in the merged entity, the number of vacancies we have, and so on. But of course, as we indicated, we've had a very smooth and a happy amalgamation of the two entities, and we are totally integrated now. And we will then give an update on what is the situation with staff. On the question again, and it links to the question of Honorable Mtaung about the underspending in the incentive industrial financing division in IDAD. As I indicated, this is the division which runs, for example, all the EMEA program, the program which I said all those trade missions are cancelled. That falls under incentive development. So as you know, 1/3 or even half of the program for that quarter was basically those trade missions was cancelled. And therefore we didn't spend that money for the EMEA program. So that is why we didn't meet that target. And then, as I indicated, the other reason for the other target not being met is that as I said, this money goes straight to the private sector, but we obviously give it to private sector companies when they undertake either, as I said, a trade mission, then we subsidize and we pay for some of the expenses they undertake on the trade mission. So of course, if we don't undertake the trade mission, we don't spend the money, and then we don't achieve our target under that program. Then with the other incentives, we give it, if a company invests, as I said, on average, we give about 20% of the investment, but it's private sector puts in 100 million, we put in 25 million, and so on. So of course, what I indicated from January, February already, companies, when they claim their incentive payments, they obviously have to, let's say, they claim a quarter of the investment they made because they had cut their investment spending. They were claiming much less from the department proportionally. So as I said, that is the reason why industrial development spent less on what they were going to do, or what they used to do in the previous financial quarters and so on. So there's no, as I said, the only reason for the decline in spending in that division is as a result of both the COVID and the decline in private sector in investment. So that takes care of that. Honorable Boyani, I think just on, and Honorable Herberts, firstly, I think we definitely take your point, and thanks for the guidance and clear leadership that you are providing. As you know, we are trying to be proactive and to immediately start helping. And as you know, we immediately created a 600-700 million rand fund, which we immediately did in March with COVID, to help distressed companies, and then also to help companies who will be producing the PPEs. And we have been working actively. So we moved within the first days of the pandemic and the disaster being declared. We diverted our incentives now towards companies in distress to ensure that they don't close down during this period. And secondly, the companies that will be growing, those producing our PPEs, we are helping them with their expansion, and so we are being proactive. As I also indicated, you're absolutely right. We must ensure that we focus on the most vulnerable sectors, which is your industrial parks, your township economy. And as I said, just in the past 2-3 weeks, we've been having sessions with our SEZs, with our industrial parks, and that is the key part of our program. With regards to that, and I gave you the good news on some of the SEZs where the investments are proceeding. As I indicated, we're proceeding with the fuel cell plant in Dubai Tradeport, and even they are continuing with a number of investments. I also reported to you that Ford the 17 billion investment and the construction of 16 brand new factories in the SEZ. They've given us the full go-ahead that they are proceeding despite COVID. So we are trying to be very proactive, Honourable Herman, but we take your point. And Honourable